Well, thank you again for joining me for this third episode of my podcast. I'm very excited to be here and just another opportunity to share just some wonderful ideas and hopefully insightful thoughts and questions, and hopefully conversations spring forward. And I'm here today with my guest, Bryan Kashon.
Hi, I'm Bryan. I am in my fourth year at HSU. I'll be graduating in May with an English major in writing practices and a theater arts minor in performance arts. If you're interested in following me after this discussion, you can follow me at almost any social media at Lumberbuns, LUMBERBUNS. I'm currently on staff at the Toy-On, which is HSU's literary magazine. It's awesome. The release party is March 22nd. You are all welcome to join. It's free, it's fun, food, anything you're interested in. And today we're going to be talking about Bryan's writing.
I finally have someone on with me. Hello out there. And it's great. I hope to have a little lively conversation, and as always, hopefully it'll spark some questions and thoughts, and don't be afraid to contact me with your comments. I love that stuff. So
shall we just jump in?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So this is sort of like a press tour for a new book, correct?
Correct. Yes. The book came out last fall, and now we're just kind of plugging it as best as we can. A struggling artist, it's kind of rough sometimes.
Yeah, I
but
found a nickel outside on the ground, and that was the most I've made all week.
Hey, I know what you mean. And just like rough working for that paycheck, hand to mouth. It's I guess part of the economy or part of the area.
So tell me about the book.
The book, sorry. Again, tangents with me. You'll learn that.
Great. I think this is working.
Great. So the new book is Search for Truth, Rude Awakening, and this one I was really excited about because it dealt with a lot of racial issues, social engineering of people. It's based in the South, and the new president is elected, moves the capital to Alabama, and really it was my vehicle or my way to kind of channel my frustrations or feelings or however you want to, whatever adjective you'd like to use during the election and all that. And so I bring up a lot of good, conversations because I think we are afraid of talking to each other sometimes. So that's why it's nice to talk to somebody else.
So this is the sixth book in the series?
This is my sixth book total, but it's it's the fourth book in the series.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm actually about 50 pages, 2 chapters from finishing the rough draft in the fifth one, which I hope will be out in the fall. And so I've kind of started to build my way towards the end of the series, and I feel like my whole every book that I've written, which that will be my 10th one.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a very hard thing to do.
Definitely. I feel like every book and everything I've written is building up to the book that comes after it, the sixth one in the series. It'll be 7. My thoughts are 7. And it's basically just what my complete, outline of what a perfect governmental system would be. Everything thrown out on the table of how I believe that, things can run well when people treat each other like human beings, and, kind of the full gamut. And yes, it'll end on a happy note. However, when I write the last book of the series, I don't know if you ever read the Celestine Prophecy books.
I have not.
But, kind of a spiritual, a lot of things going on there woven in this cool adventure story, and kind of a way to use fiction with getting some good points across. So, short story long, the last book in that series, there was 4. Basically, the whole ideas are laid out there, and people see how good and how great and how amazing things can be when, everything is how it should be. But people have a choice. And so it can immediately revert backwards. And so that's how I see the series ending. Where it's going to be like 5 or 10 years later, and people are going to have a choice. And they're going to be living this great new reality for 5 or 10 years. And they'll see that if they get apathetic, which starts with complacency, which, is an unfortunate after effect of being too comfortable. So it'll be fun. I mean, I feel really passionate. I'm really excited, and just to be able to put something out there like that,
So going a little bit beyond sort of the actual story itself, because I want to leave that for the readers. I want people to, take the book as a whole, get their own interpretation.
Sure.
I guess, what's your process? What's before that? What made you want to start writing this series?
Well, this series in particular, I've always loved fiction. I always wrote short stories when I was a kid, and just I wrote little collections of short essays. Were my first few books at first, but what really spawned this was a deep realization that I think you can get across a lot more conscious points, a lot more important things that people, you think people should know through a fictional story instead of just straight spitting facts at somebody. I feel like, they'll listen to you more. So it's basically what spurned it is using a lot of those original ideas through a fictional story and just putting what I see out there and, pulling things from my life, just like any kind of writer would do. There's bits of me in all my characters. But so I would say the passion of starting the series, I just got sick and tired of so many things going on, and so it seemed like so much noise and so much chaos, and there were so many things I could do or fix or a million directions I could go in. And I felt like I had to do something, and I felt like this at least was my voice, was a reason to, or should I say a place where I could place that passion, where I could feel like I'm doing something. Now I realize that pushing that is all part of the art and getting the voice out there, and hopefully you out there would like to buy the books, of course, shameless plug, but it's really a way to have conversations. I mean, I portray a lot of stuff in there that I think, will show people that there's a lot more that we agree on than we don't. We have a lot more in common once we let all the fog fade away. And I believe that through the book, through stories and through things people can relate to, I think that's a great way to pull people together. So for me, it's all part of this bigger picture, really, which is what got me to write the novels.
Sort of that unification.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a very admittedly liberal person, but I've had several admittedly conservative people read my stuff and really like what I have to say. So, because they know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to poke through the fog. I purposely don't mention political parties anywhere in my books, specifically because of that, and labels and everything else that I don't agree with. But
so do you think that's sort of like a good metaphor for the story itself, is like, instead of, I don't want to say, pointing fingers, but in a way making it inclusive, like you're starting a discussion at the same time without, inciting blame? Or do you feel like your stories are more so, like you said, to, poke through the fog as a means of starting a discussion?
I would like to say that. I'd like to say, as a means of poking through. At least that's what I'd like to believe. Of course, just like any artist, once you put something out there, I always felt like the great sign of a piece of art was you could put it out there and you can want it to mean one thing, and then somebody else sees it and gets something else from it, and then different people pull different things. The multi-layeredness of it, I think, shows the quality.
Yeah, I think that's even just such a crazy idea in general. Like, my interpretation of blue is, vastly different than your interpretation of blue,
Exactly.
Colors, ideologies, ideas themselves. Like, I know the viewers can't really see this, but you've got artwork strewn about your walls, all over your ceiling. Like, you got newspaper clippings, you've got books, a completely stacked bookshelf, and, like, I think all of this is art. Like, it tells a story in and of itself. Like,
it's part of who I am, and part of, I guess, living by myself for a while, of course. But I always, basically, it provides good energy for me and a nice environment. I haven't had roommates in a while, which is nice, but I like to have a space, and having that space is the basis of everything, at least for me, the stability. And it all goes into the production of the work, or my life, or just seeing how it's all connected. Because I've found what makes me a better writer is actually the same thing that makes me a better human being.
And what is that?
Is basically taking care of myself, treating myself special, being kind, feeling gratitude, inhaling beauty whenever I can. The writing experience itself, especially when you're doing such a large project, which is a marathon, you're expelling all this energy, so you need to bring some back in. Mm-hmm. My mom always used the metaphor of filling your own cup. If you spend all day filling everybody else's cup up and you don't fill your own, you're going to be left with nothing.
Good point.
So I try to have that balance. Work, play, relax, as I like to think. So it basically, and all that wrapped up together, keeps my mind in the right place.
Cool.
And keeps me healthy and able to work my mind correctly, which makes me a better writer. But doing all those other things has the added benefits of improving my life and emotional and spiritual well-being as well.
Is writing your full-time job?
No.
Yeah, I wish. That's the dream. That's the goal.
It is, of course, and I love the fact that there's many more opportunities for people to just put their work out there these days. Even in the last 10 years, how I published my books, you wouldn't have been able to do. So I'm very grateful for that. So it's a whole new world. Well, should I say whole new world? It's continually changing,
mm-hmm.
But
it's always a new world.
Yeah.
So what is the production process? What is the publishing process? Like, do you publish it on your own? Do you contact someone?
Well, it's not like in the traditional sense where before you'd have to produce the manuscript, search around for agents, because you can't go right to a publisher, because big publishers aren't going to read something from an author they don't know. So you got to audition for the agent. If they choose to represent you, then you go to the big publisher. Now, how I'll do it is I publish through Lulu.com, which is a great independent bookseller. And basically, you provide all the files. They have templates, for laying out the books, and you can provide photos, all different things you can do for the cover and everything. Mm-hmm. And the only real out-of-pocket is the ISBN number, so it makes it real affordable. Huh. And then if someone does buy it online, which is more than likely where most of the sales are going to come from, it's printed and brand new. So if you put out, or if I put out a book this year and somebody decides to buy it 10 years from now, it's printed and brand new, which is awesome because it allows books to never go out of print now because it's all digital files. Cool. It's great. So the opportunities are there. And then that rolled up into just everything else. My goal when I turned 30 was to put out my first book and then do a book a year after that. Now I'll be 37 in July, and I'll have 11 out.
Making your own book, do you come up with your own cover art as well?
The first few books I use just photos that I've taken, around the natural environment, rivers, beaches, mm-hmm. sunsets. It's quite prevalent with that around here for sure. But now, my mom, at least for the novels, mm-hmm. she does the artwork. She'll basically do like a watercolor, basically a painting of the cover, put it through Photoshop, and so that way it comes out like a real photo. And so she's basically done a lot of the cover art, which is awesome to have a creative project with my mom. We can bounce ideas off of each other, and it's very good on a lot of levels, Mm-hmm. So it's great. And then so I'll give her obviously a photo credit in the book. So it's nice. It's nice, and she's able to show her proudness, for lack of a better word, of her son. And it's great to, me and mom have definitely grown closer a lot over the years, and it's nice to have that. So
speaking about mothers, my mom wrote a lot when she was younger too. She didn't ever publish anything, but one of the things she did was she would write greeting cards and send them off, and try and get them published like that. But I think that was like a really big influence in me. Is like, oh wow, like my family member wrote when they were younger, like they pursued it, they achieved happiness. So I guess my question is like, where did writing come from for you? Like, what made you get involved in English, whether as like a form of study or as like a form of art?
Sure. Well, I guess just the love of reading from when I was young. Books. I love short stories. It was funny. I always wanted to be a play-by-play broadcaster. Sports. I was a big sports fan when I was younger. A little bit now, but way more when I was younger. And loved the stories. And I got into the writing because it felt more natural in school. Like I figured I was gonna do some kind of radio thing, which is great that these podcasts have become a thing, because now I can use the voice, because I've always loved voice work, which is, and I'd still love to do radio or whatnot, anything that comes up, really. But it just came from being able to express, get that creative energy wherever that comes from, the ideas, and being able to have people read them, give their thoughts, and I always felt like it was a great back and forth too, kind of especially in a workshop sort of situation. But the love of writing just came from, I don't know exactly where. I know that I've loved it since I was a little kid. I always felt like it was one of the more honest ways to express yourself, although all mediums of art you could say that for. And if somebody finds what does it for them, writing is just what does it for me. It's probably the easiest way I could explain it. It's a way to search my subconscious and sort of explain things in a way that I might not otherwise be able to. And sometimes putting those ideas down on paper is what makes them real. I think that's part of it for me too, is the fact that I could have all these thoughts rolling around in my head and thinking of crazy stories or ideas, but putting them on paper, it's what makes it real. It's what makes it come to life.
Something tangible.
Yes, especially through a fictional story, when you've got to describe everything a whole bunch so somebody can get a picture in their head of what's going on, basically. So it's fun. It's always a new adventure. I can feel the writing getting better with each book. Just like anything in life, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. So it's wonderful. I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm happy. Just the gamut of emotions. It's wild. After I write a chapter and I've noticed there's a difference in creating the material as opposed to just editing. It's a whole different spiritual or emotional place I come from. Because when you're writing a rough draft, you're pulling something from who knows wherever. Right, wherever that creative thing comes from. And a few hours, I'll write a chapter, and I have this huge rush of adrenaline afterwards. And so a lot of times I'll have to go sit by the river or go take a little drive. Lots of cool old backcountry roads around here. It's beautiful. And just to decompress and kind of inhale part of that beauty again. And that feeling, when I started having that, is basically when I started letting myself enjoy the process instead of trying to rush it, instead of trying to think of it too much as work, as something I have to do. Although I know, in a way, now that I've found my passion, if I don't do it, I'm going to feel weird. So in a way, I kind of have to anyway.
It's sort of finding that balance between, it's the joy of putting a piece of art out there. It's the joy of, unleashing your creativity.
Yeah.
But then it's also the work of, staying dedicated. It's the work of staying on top of, everything that goes into creating.
Exactly. And that's what it comes down to for me. Finding my most productive times. Realizing that time is the most productive, so other times of the day, not beating myself up that I can't produce the material during that other time of the day. So that's where it comes into basically discover that how everything's interconnected. So during those unproductive times, what can I do to make my productive times more productive, basically? And that's where the taking care of myself, getting enough sleep, eating right, because if I don't go to bed way late at night, if I don't, drink a bunch the night before, which I'm not advocating not drinking, but basically is not to overdo it, because I know that my brain is going to feel much better.
And feel fresh.
It's going to feel fresher. Now, everybody's going to have their different times, different times of the day, different places, whatever works for them. The mornings has just always been what works for me.
So is that when you write in the morning?
Yeah, that's when I'll write in the morning. I'll wake up, have a little coffee, have a little something to eat. I have to, because if I don't, then afterwards I'm starving, and of course came from trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like when I wake up, I'm awake, and I'm not super focused, but what I can focus on, it's like laser beam, because I don't want anything else. And when I'm creating something, I have to kind of shut everything else off, which was almost good training for people who do actual writing at a coffee shop. Instead of, without going too deeply into that part of, people who like to be seen. Of course, that's probably not as much up here, probably more Starbucks and bigger cities, and, I'm writing a screenplay and, all this stupid stuff. Point is that focusing in, coffee shops are noisy. If you can write at a coffee shop, focus in for a couple hours, and it sounds like a lot, but once you get into it and you're really like into the story, you'll stop writing and be like, oh shit, 3 hours went by? And it's those types of feelings that really lead me to believe that this is what I'm supposed to do, or this is the right thing for me.
So do you write at home, or do you write in coffee shops? Or do you have a specific place you like to write?
Well, different places. I would say my locations probably differ more when I'm in the editing process, because then I'm just reading, and I can do that at any time of the day. It doesn't really matter. It's just putting the time in, basically. Mm-hmm. For the last probably couple books I did at the coffee shop, now I basically have been writing them here. Because I'll wake up in the morning, and I won't even want to waste the time of driving to the coffee shop. I'll just want to eat something. I don't want to have to think about hardly anything at all before I write, because I have to, basically I realized for the material to be better too, not only do I have to feel every part of the process, but I basically have to clear my mind beforehand so the ideas can flow, and then clear my mind afterwards too, because the place I have to let my mind go when I write, where it's almost overcritical and obsessive compulsive about certain ideas, if I try to live my regular life like that, it could cause all kinds of problems.
You're just going to dark spiral right there.
Exactly, and especially when I'm drained of energy after writing for 3 hours. And I felt that too, again, trial and error, just like life, gardening, whatever. So, it's wonderful. I love to have the process down every time I feel like I can do it. Once these books take off, which is one thing I've tried to get myself to say is not if, but when. Kind of that positive spin on things. I try to think of myself as an optimist, try to look at the bright side, because there's a lot of darkness out there and a lot of people trying to put us down, so why should we not only make it easier for them, but why should we tear ourselves down?
Good point.
What's
your process like? I guess speaking in terms of myself as a writer, like sometimes I'll come up with an idea and I'll start writing, but then I'll realize I don't have an ending point for that, and I won't necessarily disband the writing, but I'll let it sit. And sometimes I'll let it sit for an evening, for 3 evenings, for a month, and then I've had pieces that have been sitting in my to-do list for a few years now, and not for lack of wanting to write, but for, I guess, waiting for that time of this is what I want to write about, like this is the message I'm trying to get across, and this is the vehicle that I feel could do that best. Do you sort of view your writing as a means of translating and transporting specific ideologies, or do you let it carry you? Like, do you know how your stories are going to end? or do you let it develop as it goes along? I know that was a lot of questions packed into one.
No. I'll try to unpack
Parse it out
that.
as you
Yeah,
can.
yeah, definitely. So I would say I come up with basically a bare skeleton of a story. I don't usually have an ending point, but a bare skeleton of a story. Because just like a lot of writers or people, I would spend time writing an outline, putting ideas down, and all this stuff. And I would put so much time into this stupid outline that once it came down to writing the actual thing, I felt like all the creativity was spent. And I'm supposed to look at this thing to write this thing when it should be coming from in here, and it's coming. I don't know. I couldn't jive it in my own head. If it works for other people, that's the whole thing.
Each their own.
Right. Finding what works for you. It's the whole idea. But yeah, so I'll come up with a bare skeleton and basically just sit down and fill in the blanks.
Cool.
There was a great movie that was in the late 90s. Anyways, point of the story is he had a good line in that movie. You write your first draft with your heart and your second draft with your brain. Which basically means you have to get out of your own way when you're first writing it. You're going to have all the time in the world to edit afterwards. But if you don't throw everything out there at first, not only are you going to miss something, but you're going to try to edit yourself as the writing is coming out, and it's going to constantly be stopped. Personal opinion, obviously.
That's a good point.
But so for me, I'll just basically have that bare skeleton, sit down and fill in the blanks and pull it from somewhere, life experiences, and from paying attention to news stories, books, magazine articles, speeches, anything I can get a hold of just in my normal life. And so bring that in, throw everything out. I don't stop myself. I don't care how badly something's misspelled, how bad punctuation is, because I know I can always have time to fix it. I don't want anything to stop that flow. So I'll sit down. It's like stream of consciousness for 3 hours. Probably the easiest way to explain it.
Do you have any specific writing apps? First off, let me ask, do you write by hand or do you type on a computer?
Well, I did write by hand for a while, and it's great, and I still do other little short daily things on handwriting before I'll post them and stuff. But as far as the books, I started doing it just straight on the computer, because with such a big project as a book, which it's a marathon, no matter how much you try to sprint through it, if you got to pace yourself. It's, gosh, I mean, it's, I think I had a brain fart for a second. But no, so basically, it's a long process. Got to pace myself. And basically the editing process takes probably 2 to 3 times as long as the writing process. So that's why I don't try to spend too much time on the actual writing. Now, granted, I'll research some stuff during the editing process, and I know that depending on whatever the material is, you can do more research or less. But I love just letting those ideas flow and just letting that kind of just come out. Maybe that's where that adrenaline comes from. So I love that I found this thing and can share it with people. And yes, of course, making a living is the point. I don't want to work 40 hours a week for a lot less than I'm worth, just like a lot of us. And I think part of defining the process is of a way proving to myself that I could do it, which I can. I mean, hell, if I didn't have a 40-hour a week job, I could probably write 2 books a year.
Good point.
So, just gotta take it day by day and, treat ourselves well and feel gratitude for what we have. Because if we don't spend time kind of creating what we want to see now, we're not going to get it later. And of course, that's again part of the writing process. And sorry, got off on another little tangent, but
so I see. Do you write every day?
I don't write the novel thing, or the novel thing.
The novel thing.
The novel thing, yes. The rough draft and the book stuff, I don't do that every day per se. But I do have a daily kind of 3-paragraph blurb piece that I'll put on my Facebook and every day and my website. And it's a few paragraphs long. I try to do that every day, or at least 5 to 6 days a week. And that keeps the flow going too. And those are great because it goes back to the favorite writing exercise I had in school, which is basically give you one sentence, and then you have to write a story from the one sentence.
All right.
And so a lot of the daily things, I'll sit there, and sometimes it takes me a few minutes to think of something. Sometimes I'll bounce off what I'm feeling that day. Sometimes I'll bounce it off of a news story or something I hear, something I see. Sometimes I'll just sit there and kind of have that blank stare for a few minutes. And it looks like I'm zoning out, but it's just maybe trying to quiet my mind. So eventually something will hit me, or I'll see something that'll spur a thought. I'll basically start it with a question or a line and then go from there. And it's interesting because you'll sit there for a few minutes and you're like, I'm not going to be able to write this. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm writer's block. You write a line, and then the line turns into 4 lines, which turns into 10, which turns into the finished piece of 3-4 paragraphs or whatever.
Yeah, I took a fiction creative writing class last semester, and one of the quotes we heard was like, generally the hardest part about writing is actually doing the writing.
Yeah.
And that, it spoke to me because, like, for so long, for probably, the first 3 years of my schooling, I was like, oh, yeah, I want to be a writer. Like, this is what I want to do.
Sure.
But I realized, I only wrote in bits and pieces, and, as much strength and as okay as that is, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I realized that if this is what I wanted to do, I needed to become dedicated, and then I just parsed out 30 minutes a day, and I, every day at that 30-minute period, I would just make myself sit down and write, and then, I'd find myself, the first day was a little hard, for the 30 days. And
it feels weird.
And then, as I eventually started getting in the flow, that 30 minutes, it'd be like, oh, I've been writing for an hour. Like,
exactly.
I thought it's been like 20 minutes.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful. Like, it just feels so... It feels like a release, like
definitely, and it's a stepping process. I mean, I didn't start out trying to write some 350-page book. My first book was 70 pages because it
baby steps.
Baby steps. The length wasn't the point. It was just putting something out there.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
So when you write, I guess for picking up from the day before, like,
yes.
do you read back at all and like? So I guess to just sort of put it in context, one of the things I think I'm a little bit nefarious about, and like that probably gets me bogged down, is
sure.
The first day I'll write something, and then the second day, if I don't feel like I'm on that creative streak, I'll go back and reread it. But then sometimes I get caught up in rewriting what I've already written, which sort of changes the theme. And I don't want to say I get lost in what I've already written, but like, do you just sort of force yourself to pick up from the last sentence, or do you try and write in ideas? So, like, will you not stop writing until you finished an idea, is, I guess, my question.
Okay, well, it's different with the book than one of my daily blurbs, because the daily blurb is basically, one big metaphor, one idea. So, yes, in that case, yeah, it's until it's done. Try to finish it off with a good sounding one-liner or two, and leave someone with some good thoughts. But the book stuff, it's more because, again, defining my process. I would not be able to write a chapter every day, because the day after, pulling that energy again, it's a whole process for me. I'll write the chapter in the morning. I'll let my adrenaline die down through sitting by the river for a couple hours. Then I'll have to take a nap. And then I'll wake up, and then it's basically once I'm coming back to how I like to describe it. So it's like a whole day process for me. So to go do that and then have to do it again the next day, I've found for me is too much. But that's a 30-page chapter. If it was just a little 3-paragraph thing, sure, I could do that, multiple times a day probably if I felt up to it. But with the chapters, it's once a week now. I'd like to say if I didn't have the job or I had more time, did the books for a living, once people buy them and stuff, I'd probably write every couple days. I have to have a day in between. And that's just, again, feeling yourself out. figuring out what works for you and how the ideas flow. And it's all just letting go is part of it. That's part of the whole creative process, right? Mm-hmm. Taking these ideas that are swirling around in our head, putting them down on paper, making them real. Yeah. Which that whole concept can be foreign to someone sometimes. It could be hard because sometimes the stuff that comes out of the pen you don't always want to
confront.
Exactly. It's
scary sometimes. I think it's a mixed fear between like, oh, there's a fear of like me putting something on a page and then either not liking what I've seen or not liking what it says about me, or, you know, on a secondary level, you know, the fear of someone else not liking it. So
right.
How do you, I guess, are you ever afraid to write? And if so, how do you move past it?
I probably at first I was afraid, although I've always been the type of person going through school where I take theater classes for fun. Being in front of a crowd of people was never a thing for me, so maybe that made it a little easier once I started putting material out that some people are going to like it, some people don't, but the whole point is, I guess, I'm doing for me to share with other people. I'm not doing solely for me to share it with myself, but I mean, certainly it scares me sometimes, sure, having to do it. But it's part of the balance. The fear is wrapped up in excitement, and it goes into how we perceive that process. So I'm never truly frightened of the writing. I mean, maybe in moments, but the turnaround time is quick because I realize the why. Which is really what's important. Why are we doing this thing in the first place? I could be down, I could be depressed or sad or just angry at the world. You know, I think again, the balance is balancing out the social effects or the social aspect of life and being around people and being in the environment and just balancing things out. It really helps connect everything.
I even think it says a lot with that, like, you know, you mentioned, like, just getting bogged down with reality, getting bogged down with the things in life, and even the smallest thing, like the sound of a river, or, you know, bird flying, or a friend's joke is enough to balance it out, which I think speaks volumes. Like, I think that ties back to what you were talking about at the beginning, is, like, you know, pushing through the fog and making people realize that, you know, kindness and, you know, compassion and putting into yourself what you want to put into the world goes just as far as, you know, everything else that's trying to take that out of you.
Exactly. And we end up becoming, you know, I feel we become more emotionally healthy when we're able to at least express ourselves honestly. Mm-hmm. Of course, when we may not always like what we read. Of course, that gets into the meaning of truth in general. I mean, people don't always like the truth, but it doesn't make it not the truth.
Exactly. And, like, on top of that, I think it's like, you know, on what truths are you building your life? Like, are you going to build your life on these half-truths? Are you going to build a house on ground that's sinking slowly? Or are you going to take the time, and you're going to take the effort, and you're going to
build a good foundation
to
grow from?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, and so that's certainly how I try to live my life. Try to surround myself by good people, and, you know, try to eat decently, and try to
do better than the day before.
Exactly. I mean, that's all we can really hope for. And I think that multiplied by millions of people could really have a positive social effect. I always love the metaphor of everything we need to know we learned in kindergarten. I know basically, you know, it used to be a poster everybody had hung up in the 80s. There's a lot of ways to describe it, but, you know, remember to share, treat others like you'd like to be treated.
Wait your turn,
don't piss in the sandbox, all that kind of stuff. But you grow that out, you know, to adults, and especially ones in positions of power, mean, how many problems could that solve right there?
Just looking at another human being as a human being.
Yeah.
Not as a commodity, not as a stepping stone, not
Yeah.
as something in the way of your dreams, but something in line with your dreams.
Exactly.
Something in line with your reality.
Exactly. And that's what I try to do in my writing. That's what I try to do in my life. But I'm not perfect, you know. I stumble and I fall and get upset, and anger is, I mean, it's easy to get angry these days. It's easy to let that anger kind of take hold. But I've also learned that you can't really think straight when you're at that kind of full rage level. So if we can ever evolve to the point of getting past anger so we can think clearly more, the actions we take, whether it be to improve our own lives, improve our government because they are us, will have a lot more effect. So I don't know. It's not so much taking pleasure in others' pain because, and yes, I still get angry. I try not to let it get the best of me. But I basically notice things, and I'll still see things and get upset, and there's a lot of ugliness and darkness out there. But I look at it a little differently and see what goes into it, and see people as human, and see what certain issues cause certain things to happen. And it changes it a little bit. And you start thinking of how things can improve while also basically being thankful and grateful for what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it comes back to basically not taking pleasure in others' pain, but being thankful for what we have because things could always be worse. It's like the opposite of the grass is always greener.
It's like my grass is green enough.
Yeah.
My grass can be greener, but
I mean,
my grass is still green.
Right. I mean, you know, we might be struggling for our paychecks and work some crap job that we don't like, and you know, maybe we're in some relationship that's not the best, or you know, life can always be improved. But I mean, hell, we could be living in Gaza right now. We could be living in Syria right now. I mean, life can always be worse. And so if we can do these things, and it's one of those things, like a lot, that's easier said than done. But yeah, treat other people like human beings.
Don't piss in the sandbox.
Yeah. I mean, history shows over and over and over again that if you're against the rights of people, period, you're going to lose. You know, it might take a while. Progress is slow. The moral arc of the universe is long but bends towards justice, however the old Martin Luther King line goes. But at the same time, we can do the bending. We're the ones that can make it not as long if we take action. They say that one person can't change the world. Well, enough people who believe they can change the world can. And especially with the internet and the way stuff can go viral, one person can make a video, if it's done in the right way or whatever, can make people see that we're way more alike than we're different. There's no reason to fight a lot of these fights we're having because we're ignorant or scared of somebody else, and there's way more of us than are of them. Again, another metaphor. I bounce around a lot. You'll probably learn that, or probably have, through this crazy back and forth conversation we're having. But it's good. The Wizard of Oz. Don't pay attention to the man behind a curtain. Right? Here's this all-powerful, all-knowing force, which is probably a saying against capitalism. But here's this all-powerful, all-knowing force, controls everything. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. And then they go pull the curtain back. And it's just this wrinkly old man that can't do anything. And it's basically a metaphor for the illusion of power. The people that have been, you know, the head of the power structure for hundreds of years they have all the weapons, and they have all the laws, and they have all this other stuff. But we way outnumber them. I love, if we could get 10% of the country, you're talking like, you could get 10% of the country to believe in anything. Anything. Any crazy cockamamie idea out there, right? If you could get even 5% of those people to show up somewhere.
That'd be a lot of people. There's about 330 million people in the U.S. right now.
That's 15 million people. If you got 15 million people to show up somewhere, there's nobody anything could, So it's, in critical mass. That's why I've been a firm believer in critical mass. And again, to me, that's like the ultimate togetherness and unity. So it's a lot of things I strive for. And I think if we can at least trend towards that, then we'll be a lot better off. I think that's why things died out after the Vietnam War ended. And the whole hippie revolution is there was a lot of people fighting for rights, and afterwards they were all, during the war, they were all connected, fighting for this one cause. The war ended. Then they started fighting in these different movements for all their different, women's rights and gay rights and youth rights, and all these things need to be fought for. They do. But the problem was that when everybody started seeing their own part of the movement as more important than everything else, when really it should have been all interconnected, because it's, again, the basic rights of people.
Intersectionality.
Yes. And that's what gives it power, the numbers. Because the people that are controlling everything, they want to split up. They want us apart. Because they know that, if the poor black people in the cities ever unified with the poor white rednecks out in the country, and because they realize that they're going through the same economic crap, there's nothing the people at the top could do.
United we stand, divided we fall.
That's it.
Something about a brick in a wall.
Yeah. Or dust in the wind, or, there's a few ways you could say that, sure.
What I get from this is sort of like a restructuring of the way we think, and I like to tend towards that, and the idea of you mentioned one person can't change the world, but then you talk about viral videos, and I think it's restructuring our ideas of no, one person cannot change the entire world, but one person can start, one person can knock a pebble on the side of the mountain that can hit a bigger rock, that can hit the boulder, that can start the avalanche, that can start the landslide. And the change comes from one in the beginning, and it grows. Change comes from within, and once we change ourselves, once we put into us what we want to put into the world, we're able to do so.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I hope to do. Because you could take the greatest people in history, your Martin Luther King, your Gandhi, Malcolm X to a certain extent when he came back from Mecca, specifically, at least in my own head. You take those greatest people, and all they were able to do was take it that next step. So if people of that caliber were only able to do that, then we can't expect to completely change everything right away. Because it's just not how humans are hardwired. I mean, we passed civil rights how many years ago, and we're still fighting over this because the emotional underpinnings that caused the whole thing to happen in the first place never really got paid attention to, or at least enough.
And even then, the institutions, that brought it to a breaking point never got dismantled.
Exactly. And that's part of it. But I think right now, with everything being so crazy, that's actually what gives me hope. Because that structure knows it's losing its power. It knows it's losing its grip. And somebody, or should I say a group of people or whatever, that have been in power that long, they're not going to give up without a fight. But they are losing their grip. The newer generation, honestly, there's still your pockets here and there, but they could give a shit about the old moral arguments and all the old culture war stuff. And yeah, we'll probably never fully agree on taxes and economic, like human stuff.
That's what's important.
That's what's really important anyway. I mean, and once we have that down, maybe we'll be able to get past a few of these things, or at least be able to talk about them on a human level and show our opinions back and forth where it doesn't delve into personal attacks, and realize that people are going to have different ideas and they should be able to express them as long as we're respectful. And again, comes back to treat others like you'd like to be treated.
Once again,
spread as much love as you can.
Don't piss in the sandbox.
Yes.
Never heard that one before. I think it's so funny.
Is that the...
Probably why they don't have sandboxes on playgrounds anymore.
No. It's another version of don't eat the yellow snow. Because you could see,
I've heard that one.
Yeah. Well, especially, you said you came from Colorado, so yeah, you know all about snow.
Very good place. So my last question is a little, not necessarily related to this conversation, but what do you suggest for writers trying to get involved, or not necessarily involved in the political scene, but just for people who are looking to write more, and tips, suggestions, tricks, cheat codes?
Right. I would say journaling certainly helps, because it starts off with just being able to put ideas in your head down on paper. The very basic. Again, the kindergarten thing, back to nature, back to basics. It's all part of the same thing. But it's basically getting used to expressing yourself like that. And once how someone is able to do that, there's no black and white answer, because we all have different life experiences, and we're all coming from these completely unique places. But I would say that start at a place where you tell yourself that your thoughts matter, that your ideas matter, that you start off with they matter to yourself. And it's not egotistical to think that. It's only egotistical if you stop there, because that is just the first step. Then once you get that first step down, you're used to being honest with yourself, and maybe that's part of writing, being honest with yourself. And again, that's where some of the fear can come out, certainly. Once you get used to that, then a lot of things open up, and you can go in any direction you want. But I would suggest journaling, even if it's just like a little sentence here and there. Sometimes or poems, sometimes it's little quotes, sometimes maybe it's just what you did that day. Like a literal journal, not even like emotional, just, I drove to the store, and then I went to the ocean, and I ate a sandwich, and I drank a beer. But then there was this rock that was there that was really old and had this weird crack in it, And one of my writing teachers said, you get to a point where anytime you go anywhere, it's an opportunity to write about something. Mm-hmm. And the most interesting pieces of writing have always been what people can relate to. The most real things, things that are very common. It's a kind of literature that lasts hundreds of years. So just be as real as you can, because it's not something that you can fake. Now, you can write something that you don't really mean, and someone else can read it and maybe believe it's true, but you're going to know it's not. And so until you're ready to put your true ideas down on paper, it could be difficult. And if you're not able to do that, then I would definitely suggest spending time and asking yourself why. Why do you feel that you're not worth it or not worthy when you should be? And I don't mean to tell people how they should feel, or their experiences don't mean anything, because I know a lot of people have been through a lot of rough and dark and awful, violent stuff.
But at that same time, you have a right to take up space.
Exactly.
You have a right to exist.
Exactly. And that's like the bare bones of writing, to me, is that stuff down on paper. So start small. Start with a sentence. Start with a poem. Start with a thought. Start with start with a ride to the store. Start with a happy memory of maybe when you were a kid. Like when you used to be in school and you go in and the teacher would make you write a little thing. What you did on your summer vacation.
Start with your first memory.
Yeah.
Like what is the first memory you can ever remember? I couldn't say that right now.
I can remember
snow, probably.
Yeah, right. bits and pieces and stuff when I was a kid. You know, I couldn't really say what was the youngest one, but yeah. So that's certainly the root of it is being honest with yourself and being true and
taking the time to let that happen
and know yourself. Mm-hmm. And it makes it, to some, it might make writing sound even more intimidating but at least, again, my opinion, if we do that, our writing is going to be that much better. It's going to be that much more authentic. More people are going to be able to relate to it because we honestly found who we are, what we're about, what we like to see. And once someone reads that truth or sees that authenticity or we share it with them, they'll realize that they probably feel a lot of the same things. You know, we're all coming from different places, but we're all going to the same basic place. Mm-hmm. We all come from different paths and different ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, religions, cultures. I mean, you could go on and on with the descriptions. But, again, the human thing. It all comes down to being human. And we have to respect ourselves. Because if we don't respect ourselves, how's anybody else going to respect us?
Good point.
You know, it starts with us. Doesn't end with us. It starts with us. Some people go wrong with thinking it ends with themselves, and that's where egomaniacs and narcissists come from.
Yeah.
You know, but
think of others.
Yeah, exactly. So
where can we find some of your work, Bryan?
Well, my work is certainly available on lulu.com, the wonderful independent bookseller that I publish through. I also have a bunch of sample chapters on my website, bryanradzin.com. I have some pictures and videos and whatnot on Instagram, a lot of different cool quotes and pictures and short little videos that I hope people find insightful. I also do some Twitter and, again, little quotes and pictures and things just to share with people good thoughts, because I've been picked up by the most random positivity, and I feel like it's almost my duty of paying it forward. And that's so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
All at Bryan Radzin?
All at Bryan Radzin. However, the Facebook is at Search for Truth Series.
Cool.
Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter is at Bryan Radzin. And then bryanradzin.com, lulu.com. Come check me out. You know, the more people obviously will help me be able to do this for a living, but in the end, the real idea is sharing these thoughts, having conversations. It's the whole reason I do this. I feel like it's part of my mission or my purpose without sounding too grandiose. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well,
it was an excellent discussion. I had a great time. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? You'd like to add? Any final words?
The only thing I'd like to add probably is don't tear yourself down. I know I spoke of it earlier. Don't tear yourself down. Life is too precious. Life is too short. It can be taken away the blink of an eye. We have to spend basically each day like it's our last, yes, but we have to treasure each moment we have. We get those moments to flow, but not hanging on to them too tightly. And realizing that the more we let them flow, the more they will flow. And we can unify once we see others in ourselves. And that starts with us treating ourselves special. Because then we'll want to treat others special. So, thank you for joining me. Catch you next week when we talk about racism and capitalism.